Good evening. Welcome to all those who are here in person and all of you on Zoom to Getting to Know Your Neighbor's Faith, Ask Me Anything. And tonight we have Abbess Furyu Schroeder from Green Gulch Farm, and who practices Zen Buddhism and is going to talk to us a little bit about her faith. And then obviously we'll have time for questions. So let me introduce Fu and we'll get started right away. Furyu Nancy Schroeder, a resident of Zen Center for over 40 years, became Abiding Abbess at Green Gulch Farm Zen Center in March 2014. Fu has held most of the monastic positions at Zen Center and has been an active supporter of programs for children, people of color, the gay and lesbian community, and the interfaith community. In 2008, she was elected to the Marin Women's Hall of Fame, and in 2010, she was appointed to the board of the Marin Community Foundation, where she served for 8 years. She received Dharma Transmission from Tenshin Reb Anderson in 1999. Fu will be stepping down as Abiding Abbess in March 2023, becoming a Senior Dharma Teacher. The following year, she will be retiring to Enso Village in Healdsburg, California, along with many of the Zen Center's most senior residents and teachers. She hopes to continue teaching during her retirement years. Welcome, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Wonderful to have you.
Nice to be here, So welcome. Thank you for coming, and welcome to you online. So I thought I would talk a little bit about the mountain seat ceremony, the weekend we just spent. As it said in my brief biography, I was going to be stepping down in March as Abbess at Green Gulch, and in fact I did on Friday evening. So this is kind of an auspicious weekend for me. There's a tradition, very old tradition in Zen, in which the abbot is invited by the community to basically take a seat on the mountain. So usually in China, where Zen originated, the teacher was named after the mountain where they lived. So in my case, probably I would have been Abbess Tamalpais rather than Schroeder. So we don't actually have that. Doesn't work so well here yet. Maybe someday it will. But our ceremony, our ritual ceremony that we did this weekend, we actually build a mountain, which is a platform, raised platform, and there's steps going up, and it's like this visual metaphor of the practice itself. So on Friday night, I and my comrade, Dharma comrade, whose name is Ed Sadazan, he and I both become abbots at the same time, and then we both decided after 9 years of serving in those positions. So he was serving in the San Francisco Zen Center in the city, and I was out at Green Gulch. We both said, well, why don't we both step down at the same time too? It's a 10-year term, and we thought, well, maybe 9 years is auspicious enough. So we agreed to step down together. We're both well past retirement age anyway. So that was a very lovely ceremony of basically relinquishing the authority of the position. So we each said some poems. We went up on the mountain, climbed up the stairs. We had our staffs in hand and our horsetail whisks, which are symbols of our positions. And we went up to the top of the mountain. We made some statements. We came back down. With that, we ended our abbacy. So it was really a very sweet ritual, and our community was there. And then on Saturday, the new abbot or abbess at the city center, a woman by the name of Mako, she did the same process in reverse. So she went up on the mountain to take the position. And then on Sunday, our new young abbot from Green Gulch went up on the mountain to take the position. So we now have these two new abbots, which are called in Japanese Shinmei, which means new growth. So it's a perfect thing for the spring to have us installing our new growth, our new Dharma leadership for our community. So my role right now, I'm going to be what's called a Senior Dharma Teacher. Dharma means the teaching, Buddhist teaching. And I have a lot more leeway to decide what kinds of projects I'll be working on for the benefit of the community. And I'm particularly fond of the family program, bringing children back. because of COVID, we haven't been able to welcome families with children for quite a long time, for all these years that we've been closed. So that's beginning again, hopefully this year, and also working on our DEIA, our diversity questions. I'm going to focus on that, and also on our curriculum. So we're hoping to put together something more like a seminary, so people can recognize the kinds of coursework you would take and what kinds of expectations you would have in doing training in Zen. So I think the main feeling I have about how we work with students is that our emphasis in our tradition is on daily life. So what you do during the day, how you behave, how you speak, how you hold objects, how you take care of things. Zen really has a lot to do with the present moment. So what are you doing right now? Where are your hands right now? What are you doing with your voice? How are you talking to someone else? How are you relating to other people? Are you in line with your ethical standards? What are your ethical standards? So our tradition is basically formed around a set of precepts that have to do with how I have promised to treat you. So I have promised not to kill you, or steal from you, or lie to you, sexualize you, slander you, and so on. So these are very specific promises that we make as part of our training and as part of our commitment to the practice. So that's something else I'll be continuing to do, is offering precepts to the students, the young students who come in and decide this is the way they want to live, making a promise to live for the benefit of others, which is the primary kind of core precept of our tradition. So maybe that's enough of my beginning, and I would really love to hear questions that people have about Zen. And any of you here or anyone online, very welcome. And you
So
too, of course.
I'll start. I tend to always start.
Great.
So practicing Zen Buddhism, people do it in their homes, on their daily lives. Not everybody goes to a Zen center to live, or
Right.
now Green Gulch is a working farm and a Zen center. Is it a place where people go for weekend retreats? And I've never been there, so
well, there's a good invitation for you. Please come. It would be nice to have you come. But
maybe you
you're
can
all welcome to come.
share what it is for
Sure,
people.
sure. So Green Gulch it'd been a cattle ranch for years. It'd been a dairy farm way back in the Portuguese were there. And when we basically received the farm from Nature Conservancy, it had been, before that, it had been a cattle ranch, and it wasn't a very good, the land is not really good for raising large animals, and so it never was very successful financially. So the person who owned the ranch, whose name was George Wheelwright, wanted to find a group or community that would take care of the land and not develop it, because his worst fear was that it would turn into housing, which a lot of people would like to have done all over West Marin, is to create housing. So that protection started back in the 60s, and they were very successful in protecting a lot of West Marin from development, and we're part of that. So the Zen Center was offered the opportunity to care for the land, and we had a mandate to do some kind of agriculture. So rather than raising animals, we began growing vegetables. So we have now a large number of crops that we grow there all through the summer months. We're about to receive a group of farm apprentices who will come in. So people from all over, actually all over the world, apply to come and be there for the summer. So they'll come in and learn about farming. They also are, not exactly required, but it's expected that they would also sit meditation. That's our main activity. So what happens is oftentimes the young people come in to do the farming or baking bread. We also have a kitchen. We have a kitchen apprenticeship program. We have a maintenance apprenticeship. And we have a guest program apprenticeship. And we have a farming apprenticeship. So folks who come in have this opportunity to learn skills. So we have basically a vocational program. So we can have about 60 people working there who are living there. And then we also have another 30 or so people who can come in and be in a conference. Right now we have a 30-person conference running. And then on Sundays, which is our public day, there used to be up to 100, 150 people who would come in for the public talks. When COVID happened, we stopped doing that, as most congregations did. But now we're beginning slowly to bring in people from outside to come to the talks. So I think, in answer to your question, a lot of our work is internal, people who live there and work, caring for the land and growing the produce and baking bread, as I said. And then from the outside are these various conferences or workshops or retreats, which would involve seated meditation. So we also do our own programs alongside of folks who are coming in with their own program, that they're just basically renting space from us. And then we provide them with lunch and that kind of thing. So it's complicated.
Yeah.
It's a very complicated.
Big program.
It's a big property, and it's a big program. Yeah.
And when you sit for meditation, is it 15 minutes? Is it an hour? Is it 5 minutes, which might be my limit, but.
We have two patterns right now that we're trying. For the summer months, it's a 1 hour sit with a 5 minute interval. So you sit for 25 minutes, and then you can get up and just stand there. And then you sit back down for 25 minutes. So that seems to work for most people. Right now, we're doing what's more of our traditional program, which is we start at 5 in the morning. So we sit for 40 minutes from 5 to 5:40. Then there's walking meditation for 10 minutes, and then another 40 minutes till 6:30. And then at 6:30, we chant. So we have a liturgy of kind of like hymns, only they're a little bit more atonal. There's just like a beat and a chanting sound, really an old kind of Chinese, Japanese monastic form. And so we chant for half an hour various teachings that then over time everyone learns them by chanting them every day. And then we do what's called soji, which is a temple cleaning. So after the time we spend in the Zendo meditation hall, then everyone goes out and gets an assignment, to get a broom or get a mop or go clean the toilets. So in about 20 minutes, we're able to clean pretty much the whole area around the Zendo, which is nice. And then we have a work meeting, or breakfast, and then work meeting, and then people go off to their various departments to work for the morning. So, like that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Following up on this question about the meditation, since that's the heart of your practice.
Yes.
Can you unpack that a little bit? What happens during that meditation and thought?
Yeah, I mean, I love your question. The best way to unpack it would be if we just sat here for 40 minutes. That's what happens.
Is there anything intentional going on, or is it just openness?
Well, our particular tradition is basically, it's called objectless meditation. You don't take an object, you don't take some particular thing to focus on. It's more like focusing on whatever's happening right now. So like right now, when I said that, I heard a car. So that would be the arrival in my consciousness of that sound. And then I'm also noticing, if I think, well, what else am I noticing? There's a coolness in the room. So my skin, I feel cool on my surface of my skin. I might notice that. I'm noticing this circle of light that is in front of me right now. So basically, you're just allowing whatever's happening, wherever your focus tends to go, just let that be is your meditation. There's a sound. Sometimes we can hear the ocean in the morning from where we're sitting, and that's a wonderful thing. And then the birds start singing, the dawn chorus starts, and we get to hear that as that picks up and gets kind of loud. And there's frogs right now that are, doing their thing. So I would say it's like whatever's happening is the meditation all day long.
Is it okay if I ask a follow-up question?
Sure, of course.
Yes, I love this, being aware of what's going on. What if what's going on is not harmonious?
Often not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any teaching about leading thought beyond or above that?
Well, one thing you learn, I think, after a while is you're not in control. that what's coming up, oftentimes what a lot of people experience when they first start meditating is unwanted memories. You know, things that happen to you and you don't even know which one is going to spark. I mean, I remember things from 3rd grade, and then from junior high, and then from college, and, you know, and then something I said to my mom or whatever. So these kind of unconscious memories are just kind of sitting around in there in the big stew of what we carry all the time. So when you sit quietly, they have an opportunity to sort of bubble up a little bit, and the ones that really want your attention can be very strong. Like I noticed very early on in my years of meditation that there were things I needed to take care of that had to do with my behavior, you know, not so much as a child. I was doing that in therapy, but the things I'd done as an adult that I felt were shameful. I mean, I'm not.
I understand.
Yeah,
yes.
but things that maybe lies I told, or,
Yes.
you know, unkindnesses. So those were the things that I began to say, I don't want to have these memories repeated. I would like to take care of whatever of them I can. In some cases, it's too late. I'm not going to be able to, but not to set up my life in such a way that I'm going to do those things again. So that the precepts that I mentioned are kind of an alignment with your intention, not to slander or be possessive or lie. So all the things that humans do, that we promise we won't do those. And it's hard, you know, of course, because we're conditioned to behave certain ways. So it really takes quite a long time to begin to recondition your unconscious, so that what's coming up is not quite so oh, that doesn't smell good. You know, the smells start to get a little better, a little sweeter, a little less conscience bothered by your conscience, if that makes sense.
So self-observation and correction.
Yeah, kind of invitation to review. Let's review that. And intention. You know, all of karma is a common term, certainly from the 60s, but also it is a technical term in Buddhism, meaning action. Karma means action. So actions that are intended. If I do something, intend to do something to harm you, that's karma. Accidents don't count. I'm not going to have a bad consequence from accidentally stepping on your foot. I'm so sorry, that takes care of it. But if I did it on purpose, then that's where my karma is going to start to have consequences back on me from you. So we're going to then begin to have to work out our relationship by the things that I do on purpose that I need to address, and to try to get away from those behaviors. That doesn't go very well. You know, it goes better if I don't do that. So you're being trained all the time by yourself, you know, and then your friends help you too, because sometimes you don't see all of your own behaviors so clearly. So then it's really nice to be in a community where people, hopefully kindly, will point out things to you that maybe you're not so aware of. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Are there any other questions? I don't.
Well, we had one online that was similar
Okay.
to what Ann just asked. And it was asking Fu if the ethical promises or precepts in Zen are similar to the 10 Commandments in the Hebrew Torah.
I would say that one of the places where we obviously differ has to do with the deity. So whatever that means for people of the book or Abrahamic traditions, and certainly I come from the Abrahamic tradition. I was raised an Episcopalian, and I have a lot of familiarity with that type of spirituality, and it was wonderful as a child. I loved church. I loved singing and all of it, but I couldn't sustain some understanding of what a deity was as I got older. It just stopped being rational, you know. And I think that happens to a lot of young people, teenagers, or, you know, by the time you get to college and it's all about science and astronomy, and you're kind of like, well, where is that entity? and where does it held? So for me, I had a very strong spiritual inclination as a young person. I was very drawn to church and to quiet and ritual. Zen was like the perfect opportunity because there's no overt sense of there being somebody outside of your own experience, that you are accountable to yourself and to your friends and to other people, to humanity, and how we care for this planet, because kind of the feeling in Zen is like whatever's beyond where we are here, which is a pretty big assignment anyway, basically we don't know. We don't say there's something there and or there's not something there. It's like we don't know. So not knowing in Zen is considered nearest. There's a saying, not knowing is nearest, and it's huge. Much more I don't know than I do know. So in a sense, the spiritual breadth of not knowing is the universe. I don't know the universe, even though I'm in it, and I am it. I can't know it. It's just too vast. And maybe that's something like the deity might feel to people who have more of a sense of that presence being personified in some way. So I would say our precepts are really from me to my fellow humans and to other living beings. I promise not to kill you, not because there's some outside agency or some consequence, because I'll then go to hell or I'll be punished. It's more like the punishment is in the action itself. If I harm you, my conscience is going to start to have that very negative quality that I can't just rid myself of, unless I'm sort of have some kind of mental, disturbance there. I'm not capable of a conscience, and there are people like that we know, and that's tragic. But people of conscience are going to pay if they do things that are unkind to others, because you'll carry it. So we try to be accountable to our own conscience, to the karma of our own intentional actions as much. I mean, we are. I mean, it's not like a choice. So I think our alignment is with our own promises. I keep my promises. I promised I wouldn't hurt you in any way. And I wear the clothing I wear. This particular garment is called a raksu, and I receive it when I take the precepts as a symbol of I have promised this to you, to all of you, that I won't hurt you, and I will try my best to keep that promise. So it's kind of like living your spiritual commitments as best you can. Yeah. So I would say, and now I would appreciate someone who understands the Ten Commandments maybe explaining to me how they're not so dissimilar, because I have a very less of a sophisticated understanding of the Ten Commandments. I know what the Bible and Moses went up and got them and all of that. I know all of that part, and that they're from God. And then precepts don't come from that direction. They come from, a human being telling his young monks, this doesn't work very well if you behave this way.
We need a follow-up from that, asking not so much, I guess their question, not so much about ethical behavior being judged by God, but asking whether the basic teachings from the Torah, from the Ten Commandments, are, which would be a way to live as a child of God, are those teachings, like the Ten Commandments themselves, similar to the precepts? If I'm understanding the question correctly.
I think they're similar in terms of they're human constructs. I mean, they're language, so that's a human. We've constructed language, so they're in both sets are in language. So we know language, and there's a lot of resonance between these two lists. But basically, is do unto others as you would have them do unto you seems to be the primary commandment for all of our traditions. How treat others the way you'd like to be treated seems to be pretty clear and very hard. How do we actually live that? That's the real challenge for anyone that has an ethical life or wishes to live lead an ethical life. So yes, I guess I'm saying yes. We're on the same page.
Please.
You had a question earlier?
Just wanted to
Yeah.
ask if you could maybe say a little more about the metaphor of the mountain in terms of Zen.
Yeah. Mhm. So I mentioned the mountain seat ceremony, and where the invited head, the abbot or abbess, is invited to go up the mountain. And for our way of understanding human life is that if you're called to, rather than a material well-being, but spiritual well-being, then the image of a mountain is a very, it appears many times in the literature. So basically, the aspiration to have some better understanding of our lives, of each other, and so on, is listening to wisdom. You're really listening for some good advice from somewhere. You know, how I'm not happy with how things are going. I don't understand the world, and so we hear these wisdom teachings. And this aspiration, which we in our tradition call the bodhicitta, and bodhi means awake, and chitta means mind. So the aspiration to awaken, for your mind to be awake, you know, what does that mean? Is what takes you up the mountain, or the spiritual quest. So there's a path, a well-trodden path that we call the ancestors, have traveled, as have all of your ancestors and your traditions. So we follow the footsteps of the ancestors and things that they did, whether it's ritual or study or whatever. And then little by little, you begin to get some competence in understanding the teaching. And at some point, there is an experiential core to Zen. It's called awakening or enlightenment. And I think that's what draws a lot of us to it. It's like, I'd like that. You know, that idea of waking up is a really strong pull. And what it means, no one says, right? No one will tell you. Buddha didn't say. His name means awake. Buddha means awake. But he didn't say what that meant. He just said, if you behave like this, it's more likely you're going to wake up than if you behave like that. If you think like this, it's going to help you to understand what it is to be awake. So the top of the mountain is the symbol of the awakened moment or the awakened experience. And sometimes it's like a thunderclap for somebody, or it's like, you know, some kind of, they'll cry and there'll be this tremendous expression of relief that can come, but it's not explainable. It's called non-imaginative wisdom. You can't imagine it. This kind of ungraspable sense of where you are, what you are is so big that whatever you thought you were is too small. So this sense of your kind of the grandiosity of life for each individual is what's experienced. That experience is very tempting to try and stay there. People want to live at the top of the mountain. So, you know, as I say to them often, there's no snack bar at the top of the mountain. You can't live there, you know. There's not very much oxygen. It's a very transient experience. And more than that, you're not invited to do that. You're invited to come back down from the mountain, and that invitation has to do with compassion. You know what it's like to suffer, to be confused and lost. And then when you find that moment of relief, or that many moments of relief, out of compassion, you want to come back down and help other people to aspire to come out of what's called the weeds of confusion and to take their trip also up the mountain. So we're kind of a generative process where I have students now, I have a teacher, my teacher's given me authority to teach. I have students who I'm going to give authority to teach very soon. So it's called warm hand to warm hand. We basically pass on the inspiration to go up the mountain to the next generation. So as I was saying, we have these new abbots, and they're taking, I felt like the ceremony was like a relay race. It was, I'm handing the baton of responsibilities to this young man who I've known for 30 years, and I'm so proud of him, and I am so grateful that he's there and taking the responsibility of the next generation. And that's how it's gone for 2,500 years. And our hope is it doesn't end with us. You know, we'd really like to not to be the last generation of Zen in America. So that's certainly what we're all working for, is to stay alive and stay be able to continue to, hold our property and draw new people to come and be with us. So that's the mountain. Thank you for your question.
We have some more online questions.
Mhm.
I'll ask a little reverse order. So one question is about the Four Noble Truths. If those are followed, and if so, can you explain what they are and how that works?
Wonderful, great. Four Noble Truths are what the Buddha taught in his very first sermon. So following his awakening, so he was sitting under a tree. I think a lot of you know the story of the Buddha's awakening. He'd been sitting there for 7 days, and on the morning of the 7th, or the morning of the 8th day, he saw the morning star, which probably was Venus, and he woke up. So one understanding is he didn't see the star as outside of himself anymore. He didn't see a barrier between himself and the star, or himself and the grass, or the trees, or the butterflies. Everything was part of him. He really saw the wholeness, and his inclusion in whatever was there included him. So this idea of non-separation or non-dual nature of reality, there aren't two things. There's not me and the universe. It's me and the universe is like one word, and all of us and the universe is one word. So that was his insight, his awakened insight. Then he thought after his experience, he thought this is be a vexation to try to explain what happened right here. So he was reluctant to teach, as it says in the old texts. But they were, some spiritual form came forward and said to him, please, there's so many people close to understanding, if you would just try to explain what you understood. So he gave a sermon. His first sermon was called Turning the Wheel of the Law, the Dharma. And what he said was, first he said non-duality. The truth is there are not two things. There's just one thing. So that's his enlightened insight. And then he said, and you don't see it that way. The way you see it is that things are all into parts. There are lots of parts. You're a part, and even your own body has parts, and everything you're breaking into parts. And so you need to know how to work with parts, because that's what you do. That's your relative. It's the relative truth. The ultimate truth is there's no separation. The relative truth is everything's in parts, and you need to be skillful in working with parts. And he said, to work with parts, you need to understand that there's 4 truths. The first truth is suffering. There is suffering. And the suffering's obvious. I think nobody disagrees with that. That's a truth. There is suffering. Suffering of loss, the suffering of aging, of sickness, of death, of loss of loved ones, breaking your leg. That's all suffering. But the kind of suffering, he said, I can't help you with any of those. They're just pain. What I can help you with is the mental suffering that you have when you find out that you broke your leg. Why me? Why me? Why didn't he break his leg? Why does it have to be me? Or when your best friend has a disease and is passing away, why my friend? Why not their friend? So it's the suffering of why is this happening to me that he said, I can help you with that. These are the facts of life. There is old age, sickness, and death. There's nothing to be afraid of. There's nothing to fight. It's more like relax, relax and enjoy whatever is there for you right now. So he said that first noble truth is suffering. Second noble truth is the cause of your suffering is that A, you're ignoring the non-dual nature of the universe, and B, you want things to be different than they are. You're objecting to the way things are. That's making you suffer. So then he said, the second noble truth is the cause of suffering is wanting things to be different than they are. And then he said, the third noble truth is the cessation of suffering. So that's where everybody gets, okay, tell me about that. So the cessation of suffering is what he called the fourth noble truth is the path. So there's a pathway, which I mentioned about going up the mountain, to the cessation of suffering. And the path the Buddha outlined is called the Eightfold Path. And the Eight Folds are right view, that you really do understand reality correctly, right intention, that you're not going to be mean and unkind and ingenerous, you're going to be the opposite of those. Right speech, how you speak, right conduct, your behavior, right livelihood, how you make a living. You're not selling bullets or whatever. You're doing things that are wholesome. Right effort, whatever you're doing, you're making a good effort. Right meditation, so you are spending time watching your mind and watching the operation of your life. And then right mindfulness, and paying attention to where your hands and your feet and your body is and how you're relating to objects around you all the time. So that was the path. And he said, if you follow the path, which is it's not a one thing you do, it's that how you live your life. So the path becomes a way of life. And the way of life is what brings the relief of your suffering. So it's really a big, radical kind of transformation of how you live. And then there's these guidelines to help you understand what a kind of righteous path would be, as opposed to an unwholesome choices, which it's helpful to have some guidelines. And I think that's what the Eightfold Path does give you some guidelines of how to live a wholesome life.
Can you keep asking? Okay.
Sure.
Well, someone also online was wondering if you'd be willing to recite a small bit of one of the chants.
Oh, sweet. Sure. I'll recite the one I recited when I stepped down off the mountain. I said something like, with a pocket full of shame and a pocket full of sorrows and a heart full of gratitude, I stand again here at the foot of the mountain, with only this to do. The only thing left to do, which was to offer incense in honor of the Buddha, bowing in honor of the Dharma, the teaching, and chanting in honor of the Sangha, the community, and its sacred songs. And then I did this, I chanted this, I sang, all my ancient twisted karma, from beginningless greed, hate, and delusion, born through body, speech, and mind, I now fully avow. So we do that every morning, just before we do the rest of the chants. We avow our karma, our intentional actions that we did. We say, I did that. So it's more like a confession and repentance. And I'm not going to do it again, or I'm sure going to try not to do it again. And then we do some of the other chants that are part of our liturgy, that are quite a bit longer. So thank you for asking.
If there's more questions there, are there, or?
No.
Oh, well, I had
And can you repeat questions?
yeah, if you can give me time to repeat the question, or if you
Sure,
can.
of
so,
course, yeah, thank you, yeah.
In these wonderful directions of thought, is there a healing modality to the practice where actually things can be healed?
So the question
yeah,
was,
thank you.
is there a healing modality to the practice of Zen Buddhism?
The Buddha was called the great physician. So what he was offering, his teaching, was medicine. So what I just mentioned, the Four Noble Truths, the path is medicine for our suffering. And the things that we actually have a say about, how we handle our own lives, how we respond to others, and so on. There's medicine in being, guided to perhaps a more wholesome way of being in the world. So I think that is medicine, actually. I mean, it certainly has been for me. I am really glad I'm not living the way that I invented when I was 20. It's really not going to work very well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I have a more mundane question. So is this a priestly attire? You explained a little bit about what's it called?
Rakusu.
The Rakusu, which I appreciate. I was going to ask that.
Yeah.
But is there, when you go out in public, like when you travel, what do you wear? Do you wear this? Do you wear normal street clothes? how do you differentiate, when do you decide when
What to
you
wear?
Yes.
That is the biggest question of our tradition. I think. What am I going to wear now? Thank you for asking that. Because I grew up an Episcopalian.
I did too, by the way.
I-
I'm an Episcopal priest.
Oh, are you really? Well, thank you for being with me. I really learned from priests who wore street clothes when they weren't, and they had families. So I thought that was a wonderful balance. And when they were doing service, they wore these beautiful robes and beautiful clothing that I thought was just wonderfully inspiring. But then they'd take that off, and then they'd wear kind of normal street clothes. So I pretty much follow that too. When I'm practicing in the monastery, like I was at Tassajara in this last winter for 90 days, I was a monk, because monks are in monasteries. So when I'm in the monastery, I wear monastic clothing the whole time. When I'm at Green Gulch, I wear monastic clothing when I'm lecturing, or when I'm, like right now, this is for me is a teaching venue, so I would wear, these are monastic clothes. My robes, this is Buddha's robe that I'm wearing. So when I'm sitting zazen, I'm wearing monastic robes. When I'm going to work meeting, I'm wearing trouser pants, whatever they're called, pants, and tops and sweatshirts and jackets and all kind of normal things that people wear. So I'm very comfortable with that. Some of the people I live with wear monastic clothing all the time, and they identify as monks all the time. And I feel more like I identify as a priest, as my Episcopalian ancestors did in that way.
Okay.
Follow up to that, and then another question. Question was about the symbolism of what you're wearing.
Yeah, as I said, this is a miniature of, I have a large version of this that I wear when I'm sitting. So it's called an okesa, or the robe, Buddha's robe. And so when you're, I'm not in zazen, which as I call our sitting meditation is called zazen. I'm not sitting right now, or I would be wearing the full robe. So this is a miniature. It's the same pattern as the larger robe. It's just smaller. And the design of it was a pattern that the Buddha mentioned to his monks, because they were basically wanted to dress in monastic wear, and it was hot in India, so they wore the single robe or off one shoulder. If you've seen Buddhist monks, they have one bare shoulder, and then they have the Buddha's robe that they wear. And he said, when you sew your robes, so what they would do, cloth was not easy to come by. Most of them were not, they didn't have any wealth or source of income. So they would take cloth that was in the charnel grounds or discarded or dirty cloth people that didn't want, and they'd clean them really well and then dye them all one color and then sew them back together, kind of like quilts. So the Buddha said, well, since you're doing that, why don't you make your quilts in the form of rice paddies? So that basically these lines, and we put stitches in them so that each stitch is like a plant. It's been planted into the soil, and then the rows are like what you would see in a rice field. So that was the pattern that he asked his monks to follow. So that's what this is too. So we sew I did not sew this. This was a gift I received this weekend from a Japanese Suzuki Roshi's son, who was at Green Gulch for our ceremonies. And so he brought this as a gift to myself and to the other abbot who was stepping down. So this is the first time I've worn it. I'm very pleased. And he wrote on the back of it, and because I don't read Japanese, I don't know what it says. So one of the things I'm going to do soon is to have somebody read it for me. So this represents that I have received Buddha's precepts, and I can wear Buddha's robe as part of my commitment to practice.
We have another question about what Buddhists believe about what happens after death. Do Buddhists believe in rebirth, or that the physical body is a vessel to the next level of existence? What are the beliefs around?
So the question was What do Buddhists believe about after death? The afterlife or not?
Well, the Buddha was asked that question, and he said, this will not help you become free. Speculating about life after death isn't going to be of any help to you right now. So why don't you not do that? And he declined to tell them if there was such a thing. Now, what's interesting, in his own stories about himself, he recalled previous lives. So we have this kind of interesting combination of some teachings that have to do with the Buddha's previous lifetimes, when he was a monkey and a deer and an antelope and an elephant, and he saved all of the other elephants or the other monkeys. So he did all of these many lifetimes as what's called a bodhisattva, living for the benefit of others. And as a result of that, over eons of time, so Buddhism has a lot of eons of time in its scriptures, he came back as this young boy named Shakyamuni Buddha. So he ended up on earth as a result of all of his good deeds in these different animal forms. So we have that in our literature. And then when I've asked Zen teachers, I asked one Zen teacher, Robert Aiken, I said, so what do you say about reincarnation? And he said, I don't buy it. I said, okay. So everyone gets to say how they hold that. It's not a tenet of the faith that you believe in reincarnation, but some people really do, and it's very sweet. Like at my stepping down ceremony, my former partner, who I raised a daughter with, who's now 30, almost, she said, I invited her to ask questions at the time of the ceremony, and she said, Sabrina and I came up with a question for you. Sabrina thinks you believe in reincarnation, and I think you don't. So which is it? And I said, well, to Sabrina, I say yes, and to you, I say no. So I feel like that's exactly what the tradition allows. You can, is it helpful? Would it be useful? Is that person, I think my mom really wanted there to be something that she was dying. So I never would have said to her, you're not going somewhere. I would have said, yes, you are. You're going to see dad, and you're going to, be in this beautiful place. And that was her heart, wanted that. So I would never have said no, nor would I, to anyone who has that faith. I think it's really sweet and important. I'm kind of gonna have to go cold turkey, I'm afraid, because I really don't know where this is all headed.
I'll ask one if nobody else.
Sure.
Could you tell us a little, I think I'm not done. Could you tell us a little bit about the differences between the different schools of Buddhism, or at least distinctiveness of Zen Buddhism compared to Tibetan Buddhism, or Theravada, Mahayana? Can you talk a little bit about the distinctiveness of Zen Buddhism in the context of Buddhism?
Yeah, that's a big question, Scott.
How much time?
Yeah. Well, in a nutshell, we're all come from the same root. So the Buddha, certainly, this awakening is the root of all of the Buddhist traditions. And how, the method or the technique or the teachings of how you're going to manifest that in your life is where the variations come in. It's really kind of like the method. Zen, as somebody once said, so Tibetan Buddhists and the Zen Buddhists are both in the same camp, which is called the Mahayana, or the Great Vehicle. And I'm not going to say too much about that because it's a philosophical distinction. The Theravadins, the Vipassana folks, are from a much earlier understanding of what the Buddha meant, which is kind of like a realistic understanding of there's good and there's bad, and you do good and don't do bad, and you'll be fine. So there's kind of like a real, what do you call it, realism, kind of a realism, that there really is good, there really is bad. The Mahayana was more like, you can't find anything between good and bad. They're just on a continuum. They're not separate. Good is just a complement of bad, bad is a complement of good. You have to deal with them as a whole. You're gonna not be able to get all the good over here and live there and get rid of the bad. You can't do that. So it's much more holistic in a sense, and it's called the Great Vehicle partly for that reason. So of the Mahayana traditions, the Vietnamese Zen, Thich Nhat Hanh, the Tibetans, the Chinese Chan, and the Japanese Zen are all of this Mahayana tradition. The Theravadan tradition of the older Burma and Thailand and Sri Lanka, those are really hold to much older form, a little bit like the Old Testament and the New Testament, although the parallels aren't that good. But so they are a little bit more letter of the law, and their priests are very strict. They're celibate. Our priests marry. So there's kind of a distinction you can feel between the kind of like the kind of literal way of practicing and the more like interpretive style. So one person once pointed out that the Tibetan Buddhists are really popular with visual artists. They do a lot of visualizations and drawings. The Theravadins are very popular with psychologists, and the Zen Buddhists are very popular with poets. So that, to me, was a pretty good descriptor of where the emphasis of these three different primary traditions, Buddhist traditions, lie. I think the Zen is very poetic, and so you get kind of little short, little quippy answers to things that you have to think about a little bit, not big dissertations. So that's that's a thumbnail of what the distinctions are. And then there's a lot of branching streams that flow out of all of those traditions, have their own subdivisions too. So Zen has Rinzai and Soto. We're Soto, and the Rinzai folks do koans as their primary curriculum, and we don't do that. We do just big wide space. So there are interesting variations, which I think just enrich the whole process, really.
So who is the Dalai Lama?
Dalai Lama, he's one of the schools of Tibetan Buddhism, and he is he's their spiritual leader. He's a reincarnate, according to their tradition. He was found as a little boy, and he picked up the right objects, and they said, you're the Dalai Lama, because that belonged to the last Dalai Lama.
And
So
was he chosen before the other one passed, or?
No, after that one had died. So understanding that his incarnation was now being manifest in this little boy, I think that's their understanding. The Dalai Lama I don't think he has named a successor and says he's not going to. So that's pretty interesting.
Mhm.
So, he is the Tibetan, he's the head of the Tibetan refugees that went into India. And he's probably one of the most famous Buddhists worldwide.
Right, that's why I
We've all
asked.
kind of know the Dalai Lama. What he said that I often repeat is that our religion is kindness. And I thought, that's a good summary. That's enough. Just to be kind seems like that's pretty good. So I did actually meet him, which was a very wonderful thing. He's very funny. He laughs a lot. Yeah, he laughs a lot, and very, very kind. So you can tell that he practices his belief.
Someone followed up saying, do you know what objects he picked up that he correctly picked up?
I think there was a mala, some beat. I think it was mala maybe, and some ritual objects that they gave him choices, and he chose out of them the ones that belonged to the previous Dalai Lama. I don't know, but probably you could Google that.
And is the selection of, that's particular to the Tibetan?
Yes.
And so other traditions don't have kind of the equivalent of a Dalai Lama, or they do?
Other Tibetan groups do. They have their incarnated
Right, but
leaders too.
others don't?
We don't. We have what's called ancestors, which are basically teachers who had students called warm hand to warm hand. So I have students right now who I'm transmitting my own understanding as best I can to them. So that's our way of passing on. You pass on the Dharma, not the person. So it's the teaching that it has gone through the centuries that's alive. And it's alive in these people who are care for it. So they're called vessels of the Dharma. So basically, they're just little holding containers to hold the teaching until the next little container shows up, and then you pour it into them if you can.
Can you say a little bit about how Soto Zen came to the United States and how, if at all, it's evolved since it got here?
Yeah. Well, Shunryu Suzuki Roshi, we call Roshi, means teacher, wanted to come to America. He learned English, he studied, was a very smart young man, and he'd been university educated in the Buddhist universities and had done his training in the big monasteries in Japan. He started very young. His father was a priest, so he was chosen from a very early age to do that as his profession, his vocation. And he was involved in the Second World War. He was, in Manchuria and setting up a temple, Soto Zen temple. So he barely got out before everything fell apart in Japan. And then eventually in the 50s, he came to America. He wanted to bring the Dharma to America. He felt like it was fertile ground. And so he came to San Francisco to be with the Japanese congregation there. And a lot of beatniks, they weren't hippies yet, they were in the 50s, it was more like beatniks and scholars who heard there was a Zen master in San Francisco, went and found him and asked him if they could practice with him. And he invited them into the Japanese congregation, but the Japanese said, could you take them somewhere else? They really have a different wish than doing our tradition, which we know and we've done for hundreds of years, in Japan, and they're asking something else of you. And so he decided to go with these beatniks and hippies, and that's when we got the building in San Francisco, 300 Page Street. And so these folks moved into this building together with him, and he was their teacher. And it's pretty clear from, I wasn't there, I didn't come to Zen Center while he was still alive, but it's pretty clear from those who knew him that he was an extraordinary human being, very loving, very kind, very strict in the sense of, yes, you do go to the Zendo, you don't lie, you follow the precepts. He wasn't mean, but he was very clear about the guidelines or expectations on the students. And he ordained a number of them, and then those folks he ordained became teachers, and my teacher was ordained by Suzuki Roshi. So I have that lineage, we call lineage, coming from Suzuki Roshi. And so caring for that is part of the work that we do. We have his tapes and his lectures are being cared for and published and so on. So he was really the inspired core of what's happened in San Francisco and many places in the world now. There are Suzuki Roshi branching streams, we call them, little temples all over America. There are about 60 of them now. And different places in the world. There's one in Colombia, there's a couple in Europe. So it's little by little, these little tendrils that came from this Japanese Zen teacher. When he was dying, there's a wonderful story of he held up his hand. He was very small bodied. He was about less than 5 feet tall, but no one remembers him like that. They remember him as kind of giant. His spirit was so big. But he held up his hand and he said, this little hand has done something really amazing. And he smiled, during the last few days of his life. So he knew that he had launched this tradition in America, that on this bare rock soil, that something was growing there. And so we really respect that. It's his temple that I care about and want to see continue. It's really Suzuki Roshi's. In honor of Suzuki Roshi, that I think all of us are trying our best to stay vibrant and relevant. So we have 3 temples. There's Green Gulch Farm, San Francisco Zen Center is on Page Street. It's a beautiful old Julia Morgan building. And then Tassajara is the monastery down in Carmel Valley. And so it's a lot of real estate that we need to care for.
Well, we are
Right on
out
time?
of time. You're perfect timing.
Okay,
So
good.
thank you so
You're
much
welcome.
for all the information.
You're so welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
It was really a joy. So I will let people know that next month we will have with us Rabbi Ilana Rosen Brown, who is a Jewish rabbi at a Reformed congregation, so here in San Rafael. So she'll be here next month on the third Wednesday of the month. Before that, on the first Wednesday of the month, we have meditations with Annie Jorgensen, and then on the second Wednesday of the month, we have our meditations. And who is, can you remind me?
Lately first.
Lately first from the Sufi tradition, from the Sufi. It will
Lately.
be, yeah, we'll
Great.
be leading our meditation next month. So if any of you want to make a donation online, go to our website. Scott usually types the name in. He already did. So feel free to make a donation if you would like to support the work that MIC does, particularly these. And thank you so much for coming, for joining us. I love these evenings, so, and this one was really nice.
Thank you
Thanks.
very much. Thank you all.
So thank
all.
you.
Thank you all.
Blessings.
Blessings, blessings. Okay.